Good afternoon. My name is Mu'taz El-Figueri. I am member of the Executive Committee of the Euromed Rights and chair and founder of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. It's my pleasure to moderate this side event, which address a very important issue in the human rights landscape in Egypt. Let me just make one practical note. There is only one camera that will record the side event. So the cameraman will not record faces of participants, just the panel. Just this is for security measure. So this seminar or this side event title is Torture in Egypt, Erasure of Survivor in European-Egyptian Partnership Agreement. We have a group of distinguished speakers who work intensively on the question of torture in Egypt for years. We chose for this event to focus on one angle, one important angle in the relationship, human rights in the relationship between EU and Egypt, and I will explain why exactly we choose this angle. Today marks the 26th anniversary of the International Day in support of victims of torture. And this is a very important occasion to remind ourselves and to remind policymakers and Egypt partners that torture continues to be a major concern in human rights situation in Egypt. Since the beginning of the work of the human rights movement in Egypt in the 1980s, torture was at the top of the priority of the human rights defender work in Egypt. Following the revolution in 2011, we had some hope that there will be a new legal constitutional landscape to eradicate the pandemic phenomena of torture. But following the military coup in late June, early July, and within the bleak situation of human rights, torture continued to be practiced systematically in Egypt. And this is actually testimony that made by international human rights organization, Egyptian human rights organization, but also UN expert. Recently, last year, Egypt also discussed its fifth periodic report before the committee, the CAT committee, and the committee raised very important issues when it comes to torture in Egypt, and reminded us that torture continued to be systematic in Egypt, and the government failed so far to adopt effective measures to eradicate this phenomenon. EU recently launched its comprehensive partnership with Egypt. And you know, the history of Egypt relationship with EU is back to Barcelona process. We have the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership Agreement, Association Agreement, European Neighborhood Policy, several rounds of European Neighborhood Policy. And we always observe that human rights, despite the fact that it is a fundamental component in the document that bring EU and Egypt together, the implementation and the monitoring of torture and other human rights issues are very weak when it comes to EU-Egypt relation. There is no conditionality imposed on Egypt, despite the fact that the document actually recognizes that Egypt will not be able to receive financial aid without achieving remarkable and significant reform in human rights, including the question of torture and ill treatment. Recently, in January 2024, there was the 10th Association Council. And just to be, in my view, the outcome of the council was very weak when it comes to human rights in Egypt. We can just observe that the geopolitical concern, security cooperation, and cooperation on migration take priority in the relationship between Egypt and the EU. In March, EU launched the comprehensive partnership agreement and proposed around 8 billion euro to Egypt over the coming few years. And we hold this side event in order to stress on the importance of human rights in the relationship between EU and Egypt. When it comes to torture, torture intersects with many issues and legal aspects in the country. It will be impossible to eradicate torture without having efficient and independent institution of rule of law, judiciary, court. human rights defender, space for human rights defenders, and human rights activism in Egypt has been largely restricted for years, as well as security sector reform. And this is important for Egypt partners who deal with Egypt, provide it with financial support, training, and technical support to the security apparatus. I will now introduce our speakers today. We have Mr. Grant Chopin, legal advisor of Dignity. We have Ms. Olivia Denavi. She is legal advocacy officer of Redress. She's based in London. We have Mr. Ahmed Mefrah, executive director of Committee for Justice, and Mr. Mohammed Lutfi, executive director of the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom. This side event is a joint side event organized by Dignity, Committee for Justice, Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom, Redress, Egyptian Human Rights Forum, and Euromed Rights. Each speaker will present his intervention in 5 to 7 minutes. Then we will open the floor for question and discussion. عرفت نفسي في الأول. Yeah, good. Mr. Grant.